Ambassador David Chen stood in the grand hall of the Serath Dominion, watching the historic moment he'd worked 9 months to achieve, the signing of the first peace treaty between humanity and the Serath. 9 months of brutal negotiations. 9 months of mediating between species whose approaches to honor, strength, and governance were fundamentally different. 9 months of working directly with Queen Verath, young Serath ruler who shocked her own people by proposing peace negotiations instead of continuing centuries of Serath expansion through conquest. Now, watching the Serath High Council and Earth's delegation sign the treaty, David felt overwhelming relief. He'd succeeded. Against impossible odds, he'd helped prevent war that would have killed millions. His mission was complete. He could finally go home. Except as the signing ceremony concluded and David prepared for formal goodbyes before returning to Earth, Queen Verath made an announcement that shocked everyone present. Ambassador Chen's departure authorization is denied. He will remain on Serath Prime as permanent diplomatic liaison to ensure treaty implementation. David's first reaction was confusion. They'd never discussed permanent assignment. This wasn't part of the treaty. Earth's delegation was equally surprised. They expected David to return for debriefing, not immediate permanent posting without consultation. When David requested private audience with Queen Verath, her long, elegant ears angled in expression he'd learned meant she was about to say something difficult. And he realized with dawning concern that this wasn't about treaty implementation. This was about something far more complicated. In the private royal chambers, away from political theater, Verath's carefully controlled composure cracked slightly. Her ears, rigidly formal during public ceremony, now expressed conflict and vulnerability. "You plan to leave," she said, not quite accusation but not quite simple statement either. "Of course I plan to leave. My mission was to negotiate peace treaty. We succeeded. Now I return to Earth. That's standard diplomatic procedure." "Standard for your people, perhaps," Verath said, ears flattening slightly. "But Serath culture views partnership differently. We spent 9 months building this peace together. You understand my people in ways no other human does. Your departure would destabilize everything we've built." "So assign another liaison," David suggested. "Earth has experienced." "It's not about diplomatic experience," Verath interrupted, then stopped, ears expressing emotion she was trying to suppress. "Or not only about that." David waited, recognizing she was working through something difficult. "In Serath culture, we have concept called keth'aran, battle bond, or forge partnership. When Serath work together through extended conflict, sharing struggles through repeated crises, we form bonds transcending formal relationships. It's profound connection creating obligation both." Her ears trembled. "I didn't realize it was happening until you mentioned leaving. But over 9 months, facing hostile factions together, supporting each other through moments when everything nearly collapsed, we formed keth'aran. At least I did. And abandoning someone you formed keth'aran with is one of deepest betrayals possible." "You're saying from Serath perspective my leaving feels like betrayal?" David asked. "I'm saying I've come to rely on your perspective, your support, your presence in ways I didn't anticipate," Verath responded with raw honesty. "Working with you has felt like partnership I've never experienced with my own advisors, who either fear me or try to manipulate me. You're the first person who treats me as equal, not subject to command, not superior to appease, just partner working toward shared goal." She met his eyes, and this peace is fragile. There are factions waiting for excuse to declare it failure. If you leave now, they'll see it as sign that even the human who negotiated treaty doesn't believe it will last. They'll use your departure as evidence that peace was mistake. "So I'm being held here because you formed cultural bond I didn't know I was forming, and because my departure would undermine the peace. I'm asking you to stay because both those things are true, and because I believe your staying is necessary for treaty success. And yes, because thought of you leaving after 9 months of partnership feels like losing the one person who truly understands the impossible position I'm in. David realized this was far more than political maneuvering. Verath wasn't just holding him for diplomatic advantage. She was genuinely asking him to stay because they'd formed connection that mattered personally and strategically. David spent the next week in complicated emotional state, part angry about being held without consultation, part understanding Verath's perspective, and the part he'd been trying not to acknowledge, had to admit that thought of leaving and never seeing Verath again created unexpected sense of loss. Over 9 months, he'd come to respect her enormously. Her intelligence, her courage challenging her own culture's assumptions. Their working relationship evolved into something deeper, long conversations extending past necessary meetings, moments of shared humor, mutual support when political pressures threatened to break them both. He requested another meeting to discuss practical terms. "I'll stay," David said, watching relief flash across Verath's features, "but not indefinitely and not without structure. I'll stay 1 year to help implement treaty and establish permanent diplomatic structures. Earth needs to approve this as voluntary extension. After that year, we both need institutions that can function without me." "Agreed," Verath responded immediately. "I don't want to trap you forever. I want to keep you long enough that our peace has foundation that can survive your eventual departure. And she hesitated. "I want time to understand what this connection means, beyond just working partnership." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've become person I trust most in this world. Person whose opinion I value more than my advisors. Person whose presence makes impossible tasks feel manageable. And I don't know if that's just effective professional partnership or something more personal." Her ears angled vulnerably. "I've never formed this kind of connection. My culture doesn't have framework beyond keth'aran, and that doesn't fully capture what I feel. So I'm asking you to stay partly because I need time to understand what we are to each other." David realized she was right that their relationship had become something undefined. Professional respect, yes, but also genuine care, shared values, an underlying current of attraction he'd been carefully not examining. 1 year, he said. We'll implement treaty, build structures, and figure out what we are to each other. After that, we both need to be willing to let me leave if that makes sense, because genuine connection means respecting choices even when difficult. Agreed, Verath said, holding out her hand in human gesture she'd learned. They shook on it, and the formal agreement felt like beginning rather than end. The year that followed was transformative. They worked together establishing formal diplomatic channels, training new liaisons, building trade relationships and cultural exchanges that made treaty real. But they also spent increasing time together outside official duties, Verath showing David Serath cultural treasures, sharing her world's history. David teaching her about human diversity, Earth's messy but vibrant governance. They had conversations extending through the night about military ethics, artistic beauty, what it means to lead during transitional periods. Gradually, carefully, they both acknowledged that what they felt transcended professional partnership or even keth'aran, something neither culture had perfect words for, but both recognized as profound. The crisis came 10 months into David's extension. Border incident between human and Serath vessels threatened to undermine peace. Minor confrontation that conservative factions immediately escalated, arguing treaty was naive mistake. David and Verath worked frantically to de-escalate, investigating what actually happened, pushing back against hardliners using incident as excuse. Investigation revealed what they suspected. Confrontation was deliberately engineered by elements wanting treaty to fail. Not actual crisis, but manufactured one designed to destroy what they'd built. Working together, they exposed conspiracy, prevented escalation, strengthened treaty by adding better conflict resolution mechanisms. But the crisis forced both to confront what they'd been dancing around. Their connection wasn't just about treaty implementation. They'd fallen in love, slowly, carefully, almost accidentally, but deeply and genuinely. After they resolved crisis, in quiet moment of relief and exhaustion, Verath finally spoke what they'd both been avoiding. Your year is nearly over. You could leave in 2 months and fulfill our agreement completely. But I'm asking you not to. Not because treaty needs you, we've built structures that can function without you, but because I need you. Because I've fallen in love with you in ways Serath culture doesn't have framework for but that I can't deny. David's response was quiet but absolute. I don't want to leave. I was planning to request another extension, but wasn't sure if you wanted me here or just needed me for treaty reasons. If you're saying you want me, not as diplomatic necessity but as person you care about, then I want to stay, not for one more year, permanently. They discussed what permanent presence meant practically. David would become official Earth ambassador to Serath Dominion, serving indefinitely. Unconventional but not unprecedented. Their relationship became public slowly, carefully. Not announced formally, neither culture quite knew how to categorize human-Serath romantic partnership, but acknowledged through their increasingly open partnership. Some on both sides were scandalized. Others saw it as ultimate symbol of peace. Two people from species that nearly went to war choosing each other despite every difference. Years later, when younger diplomats asked about his unconventional posting, David told them about the Queen who wouldn't let him leave, not through force but through making him realize he didn't actually want to leave. My mission was complete. I'd built the peace I came to build, could have returned to Earth and had successful career. But somewhere in building that peace, I also built connection with someone that mattered more than career progression or living on my homeworld. And Verath had courage to ask me to stay when I was preparing to leave out of assumption, rather than genuine desire. Verath added her perspective. I held him initially through diplomatic necessity, or that's what I told myself. But truth was I'd fallen in love during our months of working together, and thought of never seeing him again was unbearable. I used treaty implementation as excuse because I didn't know how to say, I love you, please don't leave to someone from species we'd nearly gone to war with. She smiled at David. Fortunately, he stayed long enough for me to find courage to be honest, and long enough to realize he felt the same. Their relationship wasn't without challenges, cultural differences, biological incompatibilities requiring accommodation, occasional suspicion from elements seeing interspecies romance as betrayal. But it was also proof that connection can transcend biology, that bonds formed through shared struggle are strongest possible, and that sometimes the mission you thought was complete was actually just beginning. David never returned to Earth permanently. He visited occasionally, maintained connections. But Serath Prime was home now, not because he was trapped but because he chose to stay when he could have left. When younger humans asked if he regretted staying, David told them about the choice he made. To prioritize connection formed over career path planned. To build life on alien world because that's where person he loved was. I completed my mission, built the peace I came to build, could have returned and called it success. He looked at Verath. But staying here, continuing to build not just peace but life with someone I love, that's the bigger success. The one I didn't know I was working toward, but that matters more than any diplomatic achievement. And Verath,